Hey everyone, it's Jenny at JC Cards. Hope you're having an awesome day. Today I'm going to be showing you 3 cards, all of which feature one of my favourite techniques, Watercolor Emboss Resist. And the extra added bonus here is that all of these backgrounds that you see are super quick and easy to make. All 3 of my cards today feature this amazing background stamp. It's designed by our very own Marion Emberson and it's called Secret Garden. I'm also using Distress Watercolor cardstock on all 3 cards. Now for my first card I'm using white pearl embossing powder, which is translucent. You can see here I've embossed it over a circle which I have coloured with a black Sharpie on 1/2, and it lets that black show through. It gives it a kind of a pearlescent tint. It's really pretty in real life. So first off, I'm using my Misty and I'm inking up the Secret Garden stamp and then stamping it down on the textured side of the Distress Watercolor cardstock. I did stamp it twice with the Wow embossing ink just to make sure I got a good impression, given this is a very textured cardstock. I then sprinkled over the white pearl embossing powder. I catch it with a coffee filter, which is really easy to just funnel back into the jar, and then I embossed it with the Wow dual speed embossing tool. Now I've adhered it to a chopping board and I'm going to be using some of my Altenew watercolours, which I just love because they're so bright and vibrant, and I'm using 3 shades of pink here. You just saw me spritz that panel with a fair amount of clear water, and then I'm picking up paint with a wet paintbrush and then gradually painting it in stripes down the panel, fading out towards the bottom. And then I'm going back in with a slightly darker pink and going down the panel again, just not quite as far. And then again I start from the top and use an even darker pink. And then peel that off and leave it to dry naturally. While that's drying, I've taken another panel of the Distress Watercolor cardstock and I'm actually using the smooth side this time. And just one tip, be sure to use your powder tool or powder bag on your panels before you heat emboss. This time I'm using the gold pearl. You can see again that it's translucent, and this time it gives a very nice gold pearly finish. Now the colour of the powder is kind of misleading. When it heat embosses, it goes a much shinier, kind of lighter goldy colour. It looks almost browny yellow before it's heat embossed. And I'll just tilt it in the light and you can see how pretty it is. I really like this powder, and this is actually the first time I've used it. Now I've stuck it down onto my chopping board like I did before, and I haven't wet it this time, but I'm just dropping in some paint with a wet paintbrush into some of the petals. I'm using the Altenew watercolor pan set again, and you'll see why this is so quick. I'm literally just splodging it in. The embossing helps to make little wells that keep that paint in the places that you want it to be. So you'll see that it's kind of trapped in a petal, it's not going outside of that petal. And I'll speed this up a little bit, but I fill in all of those flowers with a yellow. I'm then going to come in with a corally colour and drop quite kind of roughly into the centres of all of the flowers some of this coral, and I'm going to then heat it with my heat tool on setting 1 rather than leave it to dry naturally. And what that does is it kind of roughly dries that paint, so you get those nice water lines, and it gives you that effect of almost like a natural fade out that you would get on flowers without any effort at all. I'm then coming in doing the same thing with the leaves, so I'm using a lighter green here, just filling it in like I did with the petals, and then I'm coming back with a darker green and then dropping that in. You can see it here, and just going to heat it with my heat tool. I'm using setting 1 to avoid remelting any of the embossing powder, and if there's any last few drips, you can just pick those up with a paper towel. I'll give you a quick close-up here just to show you what it looks like when it's dry. You can see how easy that was, and look at the effect you get, especially against that gold pearl. It looks very cool. And then for my third background, I'm using Wow Sparkling Snow, and I love this embossing powder. You can see it completely covers the black Sharpie. It's opaque white embossing powder, I think, with clear glitter in it, and it's super, super pretty. Now, as this is embossing glitter, I highly recommend starting off the embossing by going from behind with your heat tool. It avoids blowing off any of the glitter. And look how pretty that is. I just love it. So this time I'm going to be using a chopping board again, but I haven't actually taped this one down. I'm only going to be painting in the centre, and because I want my paint to wick out, I'm going to add some clean clear water just to the centre with a paintbrush, roughly around where I want to be dropping my colours. And I'm going for a rainbow look here, so I'm going to be starting off using the same watercolours as I have for the other backgrounds, dropping in some purple. And you'll see that even though it's embossing glitter, it still does resist that watercolour paint, especially if you use more water. If you use less water, sometimes the embossing glitter will soak up the paint a little bit, but actually you get quite a cool effect. It looks slightly darker where the embossing is. So I've also come in and dropped in some pink, then I'm going for some orange, I'm then going to come in with some yellows, and I'm also going to add in some green and some blue. So I'm going for a rainbow type look, and I'm staying in the place where I've put that clean clear water at the beginning. Now I would add that you have to be careful when you're dropping in your colours that you don't mix any together that are going to make a muddy brown colour. So try to keep them as separate as possible, just the slightest amount of blending. So for example, this green, I don't want it to be touching that purple because I will get a brown colour, so I'm going to be dropping in the blue between the two of them because blue blends pretty well with purple and pretty well with green. So that's just one tip that I have there. So once all three of our backgrounds are dry, I'm going to show you how I finished the cards. So first off, for this background I'm using a DECKLE edge border die from Honeybee Stamps, and I've die cut out this panel. I'm then adding some foam tape to the back, and then I'll pop it onto a £110 card base which I have pre-scored. For the yellow cards I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I've already got my note card created, and I'm going to die cut the background. I'm actually going to die cut it 3 times with these nesting circle dies. These are my Hero Arts, and I was going for something a little bit different, and I've added foam squares to the back on this one. I add a double layer of foam squares to the slightly smaller circle, and then I realised that actually I overlapped them a little bit, and I realised I could probably get one more circle out of my background panel because it was a shame to waste it. So I added another extra layer of foam tape onto that tiny circle and popped it up in the corner. And I just trimmed off the excess of that first circle where it was sticking out over the edge. You don't have to do that, of course, but I like my cards to fit into the envelopes. Now for the rainbow card, I'm using a stitched rectangle die from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm then going to add a little bit of interest onto my panel with this clustered leaves die from Simon Says Stamp, which I'm die cutting from vellum. Vellum's great for adding interest to your background panels without too much clutter because you can see through to the panel behind it. I'm going to back my panel with some craft foam. This is, I think it's by Derice. It's adhesive backed, and it comes in a massive stack of lots of different colours. I really enjoy using it for projects like backing up panels, or you'll see a bit later on I use it behind a word die. I'm going to adhere that to another white note card. And then to add my vellum, I'm just using some liquid adhesive that dries clear, and remarkably you really can't see it when you stick down and it dries. It's quite impressive. I've not actually found a glue that does that up till now. Now for my sentiment on my pink card, I'm using this Mom die from Catherine Pooler, and as I mentioned before, I've die cut it twice, once from white cardstock and then once from some of the leftover craft foam, and I'm gluing them together. I'm then going to peel off the backing from that fun foam and adhere it directly onto the centre of my panel. And I really like having the craft foam kind of slightly offset from the white die cut. It gives it that kind of shadow effect. Now, I saw Laura Basson do this recently. I think it was Laura Basson. A quick way to create lots of sentiment strips. So I've trimmed out some cardstock with a sentiment strip banner die. And then I'm choosing a bunch of sentiments from a few stamp sets by Pinkfresh Studio and Altenew. And I'm laying them down over those strips, picking them up with my MISTI, and then I'm going to stamp them all at once using embossing ink. And it's an absolutely genius way of getting lots and lots of sentiments done very quickly. I'm using purple and black cardstock here. And then I'm going to heat emboss all of them with metallic platinum embossing powder by Wow, which is one of my favourite embossing powders for sentiments because it's not gold, but it's also not quite silver. It goes with almost everything. And then I'm just going to add the banner strips onto my cards using these foam strips. They're very, very thin foam strips from DeReese. For this card, I'm adding some sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh in a few places, and that finishes my first card. For my rainbow card, I just trimmed down the banner, gave it a bit of an angle, added it with some foam strips again. And because it's already sparkly, I didn't add any more sequins. And then for my yellow card, I trimmed up my sentiment. This is a Crafty Friends sentiment by Altenew. And then added a few sunshine sequins just for good measure. And that finishes my third card.
I hope you've enjoyed this video. It first appeared over on the Wow Embossing channel. I've got some other videos you might enjoy that I've linked to here. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click that bell to be reminded when there's a new video. Have an awesome day. Bye.